The message that split my life in 4 words lit my phone like a flare. Call me immediately. I was still deciding between 2 reds when the glass in my hand felt heavier than truth. The cork hadn't even cleared the throat of the bottle when the text gutted the quiet of my kitchen. I don't get texts from Graham Whitaker. Not in 34 years. Not when a bridge deck failed inspection in a February squall. Not when my mother died. Not when the city changed seismic codes and I lived 3 weeks at a drafting table. The man calls, or he writes on paper you can hold. So when I saw call me immediately, I called. Elias, where are you? Are you alone? He said, no hello. That's how you know the ground just shifted. I turned off the dimmer and looked at my reflection in the dark window. A man in a pressed shirt, steady hands, a life tiled like a floor he'd laid himself. Home, I said. Heading to Vivian's in an hour. Graham's voice thinned. A firm downtown Keppel in Ames has petitioned for your medical and financial records. They're representing Vivian Kane, my daughter. The name sat between us like a dropped tool on a glass tabletop. They're signaling an emergency conservatorship. The language says significant cognitive decline and erratic financial management, making you susceptible to undue influence. I let the silence lengthen until I could hear my own breath even out. I asked for the grounds the way I'd ask a junior why a lateral shear line didn't meet spec. He read from their preliminary. Missed payments, confusion, repeated calls, getting lost. Narrative work, he called it. They'll try to pad it with an expert evaluation. I looked down at my shoes. Black leather mirror shined. My cardiologist had joked last week that my labs belonged to a man with 2 gym memberships. I'm still going to dinner, I said. Graham's chair creaked. Don't, Elias, listen to me. If they're this far, they're staging. The last place you want to be is on their set. No. The word came out simple, not brave. And engineers know. I wanted to see how far along the crack ran. You don't fix a beam from across town. You climb up there. You tap it. You listen. Then go as a witness, he said finally. No wine, no signatures. Don't take so much as a pill in that house. Smile, observe, leave, and come straight to me. I stood at the counter afterward with the bottle I wasn't bringing, and felt something old reshuffle inside me, habits I'd laid down when Lydia died. I set the good Barolo back in the cabinet and chose a supermarket red, something with a label that looked like it wanted to be taken less seriously than I did. Lakeview at Dusk is a magazine. Bronze porch lights. Hydrangeas in pots, 100 curated lives. Derek opened the door before I rang, a man already mid-performance. He shook my hand like the shake should make a sound. Elias. We were starting to worry. He said we, like a country he believed he was ambassador of. Tuesday, I said. Family night. It has been my anchor since Lydia died. Vivian appeared in the kitchen's rectangle of light, apron tied but too clean to be working. Dad? She said, and the words skimmed across the tile and broke at my feet. The hug was almost careful. She stepped back and scanned me with those eyes I gave her and wished I hadn't. The eyes that measure things. Dinner was rosemary chicken, consideration arranged on a plate. Derek talked about a fintech vertical, like it was a place you could move to if the schools were good. I used to fix silence with facts, how a trust shares load, why ferries matter to a river city. Tonight I let silence do its work. I noticed how Vivian corrected Derek with the same tiny glance she used to give waiters who forgot the lemon. I noticed her watch the door when the wind made it click, watching for lateness, watching for narrative. She waited until dessert when she could be soft and the plates could act like witnesses. Dad, she said, laying a hand on mine, warm, dry, deliberate. You've carried everyone your whole life. You've earned ease. If we could just help a little, some simple forms, so we can talk to your accountant, tidy the bills, take that off your shoulders. Helping. The word has a flavor when used like that, syrup over something burnt. I looked at her. The last time I looked at her this hard, I was teaching her to ride a bike and her knees gleamed with band-aids in the sun. Lydia had said later, you'll want to hold the seat. Don't let her wobble. Let her learn her balance. Now here she was, steady in the wrong way. That's a generous thought, I said. Let me think. She smiled like the last bolt had slid into place. I stayed for coffee I didn't drink and left with a wave Derek made like a curtain. I did not drive home. I drove to Whitaker and Veers and parked where the rain turned the city into watercolors. He had not taken off his jacket. Papers were stacked like questions. We're not going to defend yet, he said before I sat. We're We're going to document. Cameras, legal placement only, common areas. Audio must be crystal. Off-site encrypted storage with my keys. Then you do something engineers hate. What's that? You perform. He didn't smile. You give them what they want to see, within our control. And you watch what they do when they think they're winning. It is not my nature to pretend. If something is failing, I say so and fix it. But I understand staging. We load test by simulation all the time. You don't drive a truck onto a new bridge to see what happens. You imagine the truck. You run the math. And sometimes, if the city won't fund the models, you bring your own truck. I nodded. On the drive home, I felt both older and younger. Older because I could hear the steel in my voice again. Younger because I'd forgotten that I used to like a fight when righteousness had a blueprint. I unlocked the door to a house I've loved for 40 years and stood in the foyer like a man about to frame a stage. I was scared. I was steady. I had a Tuesday night's worth of sugar in my veins and a plan that sounded like a clock ticking. Tomorrow they'd still see a fragile old man. Tomorrow, I'd start showing them exactly the old man they paid to find. Dinner theater in a marble maze. A family that rehearses its love usually has an audience in mind. In that Lakeview kitchen, every word hit its mark, mine included. The townhouse looks like a magazine cover because Vivian sells the magazine inside her head. Brass fixtures, herringbone floors, a bowl of limes so green you suspect they go back into the refrigerator between guests. I stood in the foyer and saw the house I had helped underwrite, and I imagined the ledger in her mind. Down payment, tuition checks, holiday flights, the love seat. The ledger's numbers were in my hand, but the handwriting, oh, that was hers. Derek guided me to the table like a maitre d' with equity. You look great, Elias, he said. Not a question. A framing. Vivian's hug was dry, the kind that leaves your shirt unwrinkled and your heart a little colder. How are you feeling? She asked, fishing with the word feeling, hoping for foggy, tired, overwhelmed. I gave her hungry. She plated me care like it could be digested. Derek warmed to his favorite subject. Derek. He is a man of projects, not profits. His adjectives are venture-shaped. Tonight it was tokenized equity slivers and first-mover arbitrage. If you hang a chandelier from a ceiling that can't carry it, you get a story about dust. He talks in chandeliers. Vivian lets him because she thinks chandeliers mean height. I watched the choreography. The way she steadied the wine bottle by the neck and didn't drink. The way she slid a folded paper under the napkins and then changed her mind. The way her questions arrived as conclusions. You've seemed overwhelmed. It's a lot. Property taxes, online payments. It's easy for things to slip. She's learned the power of a declarative disguised as a concern. I gave her the kind of answers that go into a report as bullet points. I did pay the gas bill twice. New auto pay overlap. My fault. I said it the way you say winter. A fact. Lean, unembellished. She brightened like a student who finds the back of the textbook has answers. Let us make it easier, she said. Simple forms. Standard. We just talked to your accountant for you. She said it the way Derek says synergy, as if the taste disguises the nutrition. It landed like a seed on soil she believed was tilled. I excused myself early. She walked me to the door and hugged air a second time. Drive safe, she said. You've been so forgetful. The word sat between us like a pebble she hoped would trip me. Not tonight, I said, and saw it trouble her. Graham's office at night feels like a ship. The city slides by the windows and everything essential hums. He didn't waste greetings. My worst case read is that they want ex parte positioning with an emergency angle. If they can get a declaration from a friendly psychiatrist and pad it with a dozen concerns, they'll pressure a judge into control. And the friendly? They always have one. Gold credentials. Better suit. Soft voice. He walked me through the law like he has 100 times, but tonight it sounded like a language I had to learn in a hurry. Two-party consent in Illinois means both sides must agree to be recorded in private, unless you are in a space with no reasonable expectation of privacy. Common areas of your home qualify. He had case law at the ready. We keep the cameras in archways, mantels, bookshelves, visible if you look, ignorable if you don't. We post the home security notice. We consent. That's our footing. And Elias, no bedrooms, no closed door whispers. Clean. I told him I'd install them myself. He offered a guy. I declined. I may not hang my own drywall anymore, but I can wire a lens and hide a microphone where walnut meets shadow. We ran scenario trees like an old job. If they press help, we show hands. If they press forgetful, we show day-stamped bills, clean labs, a portfolio with notes in my hand. If they bring a doctor, we bring two. Theirs and ours first. He had a name ready. Dr. Mira Klein, Chief of Geriatric Psychiatry at Rush. She doesn't sell opinions. She writes truth. Why would Vivian do this? I asked. Engineers tolerate malice. We don't understand it. The calculus has no variables for love discounted to zero. Graham looked like he'd rather not answer. Because your assets look like a solution to someone else's problem, he said. And because you taught her that if she pushes, the world gives. I taught her to ask, I said. She learned to take. I bought the cameras the next morning from a man who sells to film crews after midnight. I didn't want a nanny cam. I wanted control. I mounted a tiny lens in the kitchen mantel, centered on the armchair Vivian always chooses. Another in the study's middle shelf, disguised between an engineering text and a battered copy of Machiavelli I keep to remind myself what I'm not. The third in the foyer sconce, so I could see every entry and hear every key. The microphones were a joy, flat response, warmth without hiss. I tested the server, set the upload, checked the offsite keys twice. The sound of my own home returning to me through closed-back headphones made me nostalgic for a radio kit I built when I was 10. Then I began to perform. I called at 6:30 a.m. for the gardener's number. She scolded, maternal and condescending at once. I called at 7:30 and asked again, and the quiet on the line told me a narrative had just gained a page. I forgot a hypothetical lunch. I let the smoke alarm chirp twice before I killed the heat. I asked Vivian to help me log into my bank and watched her fingers type her own email into the recovery field with the utter entitlement of a person who believes she is the custodian of other people's passwords by birthright. I left a legal pad on my desk with questions written in pencil. Do we need to winterize the hose bibs? What's the property tax due date? Graham would tell me later to never underestimate the power of looking like you need assistance. Predators love competence when it works for them, and a trembling hand when it signs their papers. That night I sat in my living room with every light off and watched a man-shaped shadow, the reflection of me in the window, breathe. I thought about Lydia, about the last argument, about how she told me plainly the thing I could not carry. Vivian loves your money more than she loves you. I had grabbed at the one defender I had left, anger, and used it on the wrong person. I had spent the next 5 years making that sentence false because I wished it to be. I turned on the lamp. I looked at the lens in the mantel. I said out loud, to no one and to the camera, I see it now. The following Tuesday, Vivian called, bright as fruit. She mentioned simple forms again. My heart moved slow, heavy. That sounds fine, I said, letting a silk thread of resignation hang in the air. Simple is good. We set a time. She'd arrive with a leather folio. I'd have tea water ready and a pen that looks old and betrays ink like a fountain when you breathe near it. The cameras would already be rolling. The microphones would already be patient. I would be too. She would bring tax forms. I would bring a table, a pen, and gravity. Performance begins. When predators hunt by assumption, misdirection becomes armor. If they're reading a script, hand them a version you wrote first. Narratives aren't built, they're baited. With claims you'll be tempted to swat. With half-truths you'll be tempted to correct. It's a long con that thrives on your dignity. The instinct to stand and shout, I am not what you say, is the instinct they price into their plan. Graham taught me that. Lydia would have said it more simply. Don't argue with a mirror. It reflects what it's told. So I wrote my own reflection. At 6:30 a.m., my voice had a tremor I borrowed from my father's last winter. Viv, do you have the gardener's number? She sighed. I apologized. I called at 7:30. It's on the fridge, Dad. When are we having lunch? Friday. Oh, of course, she softened. Predators pet you when they believe you're docile. I left a bag of keys on the hall table with labels so clear they practically shouted competence, and then I called to ask if I'd left them at her place. No, she said. Check the bowl. I thanked her like a child thanks a teacher for a ruler. The smoke alarm chirped once mid-morning, and the security company called her, and she called me. Are you all right? Fine, I said. Pan got away from me. It hadn't. The oil had warmed until it smoked, then cooled. But the call log now had a notch. I asked for her help logging into the bank, and when she typed her email in the recovery field like a tourist carving initials into a marble bench, the camera in my study hummed a gentle approval. The mic picked up the sound of her ring hitting the desk. Graham would later say the ring sound sweetened the moment, a soft clink of entitlement. The house began to feel less like a home than a stage. Less like a stage than a classroom where I finally understood the lesson. I thought of all the times I'd rolled my eyes at Lydia for labeling bins, for keeping paper receipts when PDFs would do, for printing statements before she reconciled them. "I like the weight," she'd say. "I like that truth can be picked up," I used to tease. Now I touched her labels like they were prayers written in a language I was just beginning to learn. On the kitchen mantel, the lens saw the whole of the armchair where Vivian likes to drape a leg and pretend comfort. In the study, the eye between the art of war and mechanics of materials framed my desk like a jury. The foyer lens caught every arrival and, critically, the key. If Vivian used her own to enter, it would mean something later. I practiced a shaky signature. It's a small betrayal of self, forging yourself worse than you are. The pen slipped like a lie you tell to save your life. Lydia used to say a signature is a promise. Tonight mine would be a trap. She came on a Tuesday, the BMW white as a tooth. The foyer captured the key. The house filled with her perfume and the musicality of a voice that thinks it's been hired to narrate a documentary about altruism. "Dad, you sound better today," she said, less foggy. She sat, crossed her legs, unzipped the leather folio with a sound meant to do two things, impress and soothe. "These are simple tax forms. Standard. Just lets us talk to your accountant, manage bills, make it easy." I made my eyes a little tired. "So many words," I said, and let the pen hang in my fingers like it weighed something new. She put her thumb, red lacquered, on the title. Anyone watching without intention would think she was just stabilizing the stack. "The camera records intention too. What does it say up top?" I asked. She didn't move her thumb. "Authorization for taxpayer, standard." I reached and bumped the stack. For one clear second, the title breathed between her thumb and the paper, and the mantle lens saw it the way a hawk sees a field mouse from a mile up. Durable power of attorney. She sighed. "Dad, careful." Thumb back down. "Right here." I signed like a man 3 steps into a fog he doesn't remember entering. The signature looked like mine if my hand had forgotten me. If you've never watched someone you love try to trick you, I hope you never do. If you've never sold the lie back to them, I hope you never have to. When you do, your heart does an odd thing. It slows. The body doesn't race in the presence of treachery. It narrows. She took the paper like air, like a woman who has just removed a stone from her shoe. "See? Easier already." She chatted about nothing for 3 minutes so the scene could conclude under the cover of normalcy. She kissed the air near my cheek and left a ghost of perfume on my face I washed off by habit the moment she was gone. I walked to my study and opened the laptop and rewound and watched the scene like a director who has just seen an actor hit a mark he didn't know was taped there. Her thumb, her voice, the line. "Exhibit A," then came the call. "Dad," she said 2 days later, voice a little too light. "A dear friend of mine, Dr. Lionel Prentice, is going to be in your area. He's brilliant with seniors. Not a doctor, more like someone who helps people stay sharp. He can pop by for a chat." Her delight at the word chat told me the legal counsel had been good. A chat writes itself into a declaration without anyone using words like compel. "I have a doctor," I said. "He says I'm as fit as a fiddle," she finished. "Yes, Lionel isn't like that. He's just a helpful voice." "Thursday at 10, she said when I caved with the right amount of reluctance. "I'll be there too, so you're comfortable." This was the moment she thought she'd won. People in power forget that comfort is often a trapdoor built by the other side. I called Graham. "Thursday 10. The hired gun. Good," he said. "Wednesday 9 hours. Dr. Mira Klein. She doesn't tolerate theater." Dr. Klein arrived with hair that has never apologized for being practical. She carried a binder and the moral confidence of a person who has watched hundreds die and learned what matters. She did not chat. She conducted MMSE, recall, abstraction, the clock. 30 out of 30, she said, not smiling because truth doesn't need soft lighting. "You are exceptional. If Dr. Prentice files otherwise, I will be in the room." When Prentice came the next morning, the mantle lens watched Vivian enter with her key and watched Prentice admire the home of the man he intended to unhouse. He sat, crossed a leg, took out a little leather notebook like a magician palming a coin. He asked about confusion. I answered with anger. He tried to reframe anger as paranoia. I reframed it as recognition. He gave me the clock like a pop quiz. I gave him a blueprint like a reprimand. My minute hand landed on the 2. My hour hand knew the geometry of 1/6 past 11. I drew the escapement because if you're going to be accused of perseveration, you might as well make it useful. He left with a face that had learned that not every smile buys you a bridge. By afternoon, his declaration would already be attached to a petition. By evening, I'd learned they didn't just want control. They wanted a sale. The thumb on the title lies often arrive laminated with simple and standard. Her thumb wore both words like nail polish. There's a posture people adopt when they're acting on advice they paid too much for. Vivian sat in my chair like a person who had been taught to create frames, angling her body toward me to imply intimacy, lowering her voice to imply gravity, using words like standard because they travel well between rooms and show up pretty in transcripts. She had a leather folio like a corporate organ. The zipper sang a bar of something expensive. The stack of papers inside had a weight that tempted you to believe in it. She stacked it, aligned it, and then performed the trick. The thumb, perfectly red, pressed onto the title like the lid on a pot beginning to rattle. Simple tax forms, she said, like a babysitter explaining a bedtime routine to a child who has graduated high school. Standard, it just authorizes us to talk to your accountant, help with bills, simplify. People who deceive often do 2 things at once: tell the lie and reuse your values. She knows I love order, so she sells me simplify. She knows I love system, so she sells me standard. It's a magician's patter. Keep the ear busy while the hand finds the card. I tilted my head and narrowed my eyes the way men my age do when they're pretending they can't see the numbers. "Oh my," I said. So many legal words. What does it say at the top? She didn't move the thumb. She moved her voice. From preciously patient to annoyed, from annoyed to officious. "Authorization for taxpayer," she said. Standard. Words like authorization and taxpayer work like anesthetics. They numb you enough that the incision seems minor. I let the pen hover. She leaned in. The camera on the mantel watched every muscle fiber in her hand. It can't know intent, Graham told me later, but juries do. And judges are human. I am a man who loves control. Signing was the hardest thing I've done since telling Lydia I'd go home without her. I bumped the stack the way I've watched apprentices tug at a tape to accidentally knock a beam into view. Her thumb slipped just a hair, and for one beautiful second, the letters breathed, "Durable power of attorney." The camera caught it like lightning. She exhaled a sigh that most women reserve for the end of a long, unfair day. "Dad, careful," she said. Thumb back on the title. The microphone caught the delicate paper fiber whisper of her ring dragging against the top sheet. Graham would call it texture. I call it evidence. I signed, and I signed wrong. It takes practice to simulate deterioration without slipping into parody. You have to land where a stranger could believe decline has begun, not so far they'd think you were mocking it. The letter forms shivered. I set the pen down like a man who'd forgotten where to put it. She scooped the paper back into the stack like a person snatching game pieces in a thunderstorm. She smiled the smile of a burglar who knows the alarm is on delay. "See? All done. Easier already." She left with the folio tucked tight and her shoulders 6 ounces higher than when she came in. The door closed. The foyer lens watched her use her key to lock me into my own home. I stood in the hall a second longer than I had to, long enough to hear the house decide not to throw up. Back in the study, the laptop lit the room a color that belongs to hospitals. I scrubbed the footage and watched the scene unfold objectively, as if I didn't know the people. The surgeon in the expensive coat, the patient trusting the wrong hand, the instrument glinting, her voice when she said standard, the thumb, the slip, the title. I ran it again and again until the part of me that wanted to scream at the screen got tired and sat down. Exhibit A. It wasn't a letter to a judge. It was a ticket with a timestamp to a place courts understand better than tears, intention. 2 days later, she called with Dr. Prentice in her mouth. You can tell if someone's lying by how they sell just a chat, just a favor, just to make me feel better. They shrink the word like a sweater in the wash and ask you to put it on anyway. I let my breath flutter against the phone. "If it makes you happy," I said. The silence at her end crackled with triumph. Her voice got brighter and more childish. "Daddy?" She hasn't called me that since she wanted a pony. Now she wanted a report. Wednesday, Dr. Klein administered truth. She didn't smile when I beat her tests because she's watched too many families mistake good numbers for good news. "You are exceptional," she said, and notarized it because paper still matters when memory is on trial. Thursday, Prentice performed coddling. He asked me what day it was. I gave him October and Thursday and 10:14 and my zip code and the fact he was 10 minutes late. He looked at Vivian when I said late because she had told him agitated would be easy to find. I told him I was angry, not confused. He wrote paranoid because anger is the wrong emotion to bring to men who like to extract consent. He pulled a blank page and a pen like a waiter setting dessert, and I drew him a clock that didn't need a battery to run. He left stiff. Vivian followed him with eyes that promised retaliation. I named the file Exhibit B and watched it upload to an off-site server whose keys live in Graham's pocket. I was still watching the bar turn blue when my phone buzzed. Graham's voice didn't ask if I was all right. "They filed," he said. "Emergency petition." 7 days. They filed with the Prentice Declaration? I asked, stupidly surprised even though I knew the trick. "Write it before you meet the man." "Let the meeting be garnish." "They did," he said. "And there's a clause I've never seen used this fast. They want immediate authority to sell your home." The room felt heavier. I think I put a hand on the desk. "Why the house?" "I don't know," Graham said. "Yet. Sometimes you diagram a structure and you can't find the load. Then a noise starts somewhere you didn't expect and you know something is pulling on this you can't see." I hung up. I looked around my study, the books, the model of the Monroe Street Bridge I carved for Lydia's 50th, the lamp she insisted we keep even after the cat knocked it twice. I touched the back of the chair and the wood was warm where my hand had always been. The next morning, the pray play continued. Small stumbles, a phone call to ask about trash day, a pause on the porch with the keys jangling like a question. But inside my ribs, a different machine had started. The thing a man builds when the people he loves turn into people he doesn't recognize. It is not rage. Rage burns hot and leaves you sucking ash. This was colder. It hummed. It had teeth that fit. Graham called 2 days later with the tone he saves for news he can sharpen into a weapon. "I found it," he said. "Why they need the house sold now?" He told me about Derek's newest purchase. Not a car, not watches. A fractional jet share, a slice of a sky he believes he owns. 250,000 non-refundable already down. 1.6 million balance due in 10 days. He'd told the broker he had an inheritance inbound. "My house's quick sale number?" 1.6, the word I said into the phone wasn't a word. It was a sound men make when their hands have been on a steering wheel and suddenly the car isn't theirs. "Now we know," Graham said. "They weren't trying to guard my estate. They were trying to liquidate my life on a deadline. And the clock they started would be the clock that undid them." He hired Gunvers, the truth some experts will diagnose whatever they were paid to find. That's why you get to the truth first and timestamp it. The morning Dr. Mira Klein visited, the house smelled like coffee and lemon oil and a little fear. She arrived precisely at 9 with a leather binder and none of the theater Prentice carries like cologne. She is a person whose face has learned not to add meaning where the data already speaks. "Mr. Mercer," she said, shaking my hand like two colleagues share an equation. "I'm here to conduct a full clinical evaluation. I am not your advocate or your opponent. I am your examiner. If you are who I think you are, that will be good news. If you aren't, it will be the news. I respect news," I said. We sat in the study. The camera ran because truth doesn't mind being recorded. She started with orientation, date, day, season, location. I gave her Thursday, October, the fact that the leaves on Southport were starting to mat the gutters. That I'd called the city last week because the storm drains on Roscoe back up after 2 inches in 24 hours. She smiled the way a math teacher smiles when you show your work. "Spell world backward." "Dilro," I said. "Count backward from 100 by sevens." 93, 86, 79, 72, 65. I stopped when she did. She made a mark. She gave me 3 words to remember, then took them away with a dozen other thoughts. A drawing to copy, a shape to rotate in my head, a puzzle about proverbs. "What does a stitch in time saves 9 mean?" "Preventative maintenance on structural systems pays tenfold over emergency repair," I said, and we both let the metaphor stand in the room like a witness. "Now those 3 words," she said later. "Apple, table, penny," I answered. She didn't nod. She wrote, "We did the clock, of course." She didn't comment when my minute hand landed exactly at the 2, and my hour hand crept a fraction past 11 like it had a reason to be there. She did pause when I added the escapement diagram. "Engineer," she said, not a question. "Structural," I answered. "Monroe Street Bridge, Westchester expansion, a little consulting on the Davis Skyway." "What's your portfolio up year over year?" She asked, casual as if we were at brunch. 9%, I said. I rebalanced in January, pulled tech exposure while the index danced. Bonds and utilities bought me sleep. She closed the binder with the finality I used to close a project file when the city signed off. "Mr. Mercer, you are exceptional," she said. "Your MMSE is 30/30. Your recall, abstraction, visuospatial construction, all strong. I will prepare a 12 or 13-page notarized report today and deliver it to Mr. Whitaker by 4. If Dr. Prentice files contrary, I will attend. Notarized is the kind of word you learn to love when someone else wants to rename your mind." The next morning at 10:10, Vivian arrived with Prentice exactly the way I expected a man like him to arrive, late and smiling. He took my hand with softness and praise, complimented the house like he'd already marked the windows for removal. "So, Elias," he said, patting his leather notebook, "Vivian tells me you're feeling overwhelmed." The way he said, "Vivian tells me," told me he'd already drafted what he would eventually file. He asked about hunger, sleep, whether I ever feel people are against me. "Anger," I said. "I feel anger," he wrote, paranoid. "People like him call anger the wrong name so they can sedate it." He tried to establish help. "Vivian just wants to take the load off," he said. "Wouldn't that be nice?" "No," I said. "Nice would be my wife alive." He wrote fixation. He asked me to draw a clock. He meant to hand me a tripwire. I handed him a mechanism. He called it perseveration later, of course, because if you can convince a judge that competence is compulsion, you can waterboard a narrative into mercy. He thanked me and left quickly, too quickly for a man who wanted to linger and be right. That afternoon, Graham called with the petition in his voice. Emergency hearing set, 7 days. Prentice's declaration attached like chewing gum to a shoe. He listed the asking: control of my finances, medical decisions, and immediate authority to sell my home. Immediate, he emphasized. On what perseveration grounds, I asked. It came out more bitter than I intended. On the grounds that your daughter has told a story and paid a man to set it to music, he said. We will play our recording. We spent that evening staging paper in a way a judge would respect. Lydia's file habits, my tax returns, investment notes with dates and check marks and small calculations in my hand. Judges are human, Elias, Graham said. They respond to work, to order, to the idea that a life has been kept. I also went hunting for Lydia. Her handwriting is a scent, a slightly right-leaning script that isn't showy but has pride. I found it on the labels of old boxes. I found it on the backs of photos. At the very back of the study closet, behind the bin labeled winter scarves I never throw away, there was a banker's box with her name on it and something like weight inside. The key I didn't recognize. The envelope sealed with wax-like letters in movies about war. When I broke the seal, my hand shook. The letter was dated the week after we learned the truth about Lydia's body. She wrote like Lydia always did, without drama, with precision. She told me she had watched Vivian longer and without indulgence. She told me she'd built a fortress of law around us because she couldn't build one of bone. Behind the letter, a trust document, irrevocable, signed, witnessed, the deed to the house transferred years ago. The brokerage account retitled. I was lifetime beneficiary with full right to live and receive income, but without the power to sell or be coerced into gifting principal. The trustee? Noelle Park, our niece. The quiet one. The one Vivian calls boring, which turns out to be a synonym for trustworthy. I slept that night with Lydia's letter on the nightstand, and for the first time since she died, the house felt like it might keep me even if the world didn't. The days leading to court were measured not in hours but in staples. Graham stacked Exhibit A, the thumb, the lie, and Exhibit B, the clock, the calm, like angles and loads in a sketch. He called Dr. Klein and she said she would come. He reread case law until his eyes watered. I practiced stillness until mine did. They would march into court with a story and a smile. We would bring paper, timestamps, and a dead woman's blueprint, and let gravity decide. The fire sale motive, the 1.6-minute deadline. Greed makes noise. Desperation keeps time. I didn't hear greed, only the tick of a debt coming due. Why the house? I asked Graham. Lawyers prefer causes. Engineers require loads. Something was pulling. We just couldn't see it yet. 2 days later he called with the voice he uses when the blueprint suddenly makes sense. Found it, he said, not triumphant, disgusted. Derek didn't buy a car. He bought a fractional jet share, 1/4. Non-refundable $250,000 down, $1.6 million due on delivery in 10 days. He told the broker he had an inheritance clearing. There it was. The weight hung off the far end of my life. The lowball quick sale number on my house matched their balance due like jaw to hinge. They weren't safeguarding me. They were pawning me. They weren't building a case. They were covering a check. I set the phone down and the house I'd built with Lydia shifted under my feet. Not literally, the joists were fine. But memory has a subfloor and I could feel rot where trust should have been. I walked into the workshop to steady my hands the way I had after her funeral. Sandpaper maple, the small honest dust of work. Only this time the dust tasted metallic. Graham laid out the plan. We don't just rebut, the court must understand the motive. Judges see petitions like this every month. What they don't often see is a deadline backed by a contract. We'll subpoena the broker's communications, the purchase agreement, proof of funds claim. We tie their emergency to their extravagance. We show pressure, not concern. You'll get the contract? My investigator already has it. Derek is the kind of man who forwards a PDF from a personal address with the subject line, finally. Graham sighed. And Elias, Vivian knows none of this. She thinks she's saving her father from his confusion. What she's actually doing is saving her husband from his bounce. For 48 hours, I turned my study into a staging ground. Lydia's old banker boxes became battlements. 10 years of tax returns neatly tabbed. Investment letters in my handwriting, dated. Recalculations scribbled in margins only I could read without translation. Trim, QQQ, rebalance, 60-40, 45-55. Utilities paid on time. Property taxes marked paid with a line straight as a plum. My cardiology report, resting heart rate 58, BP 122/74. If they wanted a declining mind propped on a failing body, they would have to go somewhere else. At 2 a.m., I found Lydia, not a vision, a box. Emily personal, in her looping hand. A man can be forgiven for merging names when grief braids memory. What matters is the handwriting was hers. The blue tag key to a bank we never used. The vault, the sealed letter, the irrevocable trust. My wife had seen the fire 10 city blocks away and installed sprinklers while I argued with the weather report. I slept a little then. Lydia's letter on my chest like a blueprint you can't memorize but refuse to put down. Court prep became choreography. Graham framed Exhibit A, the red thumb on durable power of attorney, beside Exhibit B, the 2-hour high-definition Prentice fiasco. Then he stapled the jet share agreement behind them like the answer key nobody expects you to bring. We will not let them pretend this is about your confusion, he said. It's about their calendar. The hearing notice arrived. 7 days. Across town, a broker circled 10 on his delivery sheet and texted Derek a champagne emoji. We would later pull that message too. The law may be complicated. Hubris is always simple. The night before court, I walked the house Lydia protected. Kitchen window over the rose garden, she whispered into bloom. The hallway nick where Vivian crashed her scooter and I promised to make the wall new. I never did. The stair creak I never fixed because silence is sometimes worse than noise. I touched the banister and heard Lydia's voice the last night she slept in our bed. You always build for pressure, she said. Build for people this time. I thought I had. I was wrong about who counted as people. They wanted a judge to see a fragile man. I would show her a deadline, a jet, and a daughter holding a match. The courtroom demolition, precision versus performance. Courtrooms don't love drama. They love gravity. We let paper fall. King County Superior Court had the personality of a conference room and the acoustics of a chapel. Vivian arrived in navy and performance, hair slicked into the shape of reliability. Derek wore a suit that smelled like inheritance. Barkley, their lawyer, had a smile too sharp for daylight. We sat without whispering. Graham's folder looked thin on purpose. Barkley's opening sang a lullaby of decline. Missed utilities, burned pans, repeated calls, anecdotes designed to haunt a judge's sense of duty. Then came their star, Dr. Prentice, sworn, seated, smooth. He performed his diagnosis like a TED Talk. Agitation, paranoid delusions, measurable cognitive impairment. He brandished the clock I had drawn, reframing precision as perseveration, engineering as obsession. In my expert opinion, he concluded, Mr. Peterson is in early decline and a danger to himself. Graham stood. He didn't carry a stack. He brought one question at a time. Doctor, did you draft your declaration before meeting my client? Prentice hedged. Graham held him to yes-no. Is it common in your experience for dementia patients to recall from memory the escapement mechanics of an analog clock, gear ratios, pallet fork, balance wheel? No, Prentice said, small. Thank you. Gravity shifted. The judge leaned forward over the drawing she had just been asked to fear. Then Graham called Dr. Mira Klein. No cologne, no theatrics. Mr. Peterson scored 30-30 on MMSE, she said, with exceptional abstraction and recall. Anger is not paranoia. It is an accurate response to a predatory situation. Barkley objected. The judge sustained. Klein returned to numbers like a surgeon returning to anatomy. She submitted a notarized 13-page report. Judges adore notarized pages the way engineers adore steel that arrives on spec. Graham didn't sit. Your Honor, Respondent's Exhibit C. The monitors woke. My living room. The mantle angle. The red thumb. Durable power of attorney. And Vivian's voice. Simple tax forms. Standard. The courtroom exhaled the same word in different keys. Oh. Barkley turned the color of paper. Vivian went wax white. Derek checked the exit like a mall Santa scanning for reindeer. The judge's face is the one image I'll keep laminated in my head. It went from neutral to cold to righteous. She called the petition what it was. Fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. She dismissed it with prejudice. Dead on arrival, dead forever. She referred Barkley to the bar, Prentice to the medical board. Then she turned on Vivian with a kind of fury I've only seen mothers bring to soccer sidelines when someone shoves a kid too hard. Get out of my courtroom, she said, low and deadly. We could have left it there. But Graham doesn't walk away from the last nail. Your Honor, we're not finished, he said. That was the defense. We didn't need the judge for the next part. We needed a hallway. They thought the fall was over. Lydia had left one last step, and Vivian was about to miss it. The secret fortress, irrevocable means irrevocable. Some blueprints are drawn in ink. Lydia's was drafted in law. Irrevocable is concrete poured into time. The vault was colder than a hospital and kinder than a courtroom. When I lifted the lid on box 312, I expected jewelry, bearer bonds, movie logic. What I found weighed more, paper with our future written cleanly across it. Lydia's letter apologized for the secret. Then it made its case. A lifetime of watching, a mother's unrose-colored lens. She had loved Vivian the way only a mother can, without condition, with accuracy. She has a hole inside her, Lydia wrote, not for money but for what money proves. And Derek, a gasoline fool. She feared the day grief would make me gentle where I should be guarded. So she built a machine that would defend me in silence. Behind the letter, Declaration of Trust. Peterson family, irrevocable trust. Not our kitchen table estate plan. A sophisticated engine created with her brother-in-law. A shark in wingtips whose business card weighed as much as a coin. Schedules attached like rivets. Schedule A, the house, deed transferred 6 years ago. Schedule B, brokerage, every share retitled. Schedule C, retirement funds. The trust owned the principal. I was named lifetime beneficiary, the income, the house, the living. But the power to sell, gift, encumber, not mine. That lever lived with a trustee Lydia chose with asymmetrical genius, our niece Sarah, the boring oncology nurse. Invisible to Vivian's ambitions, unimpeachable in any court that has ever watched a nurse work. I read until the words stopped being ink and became architecture. Lydia had locked the doors I thought my love would always keep shut. Do not be angry with me for this secret, she wrote. Be free I was. For the first time since she died, I felt more protected than alone. Grief is a house where windows whistle. Love is someone installing weather stripping when you're not looking. Graham met me with the smile of a man who knows his closing argument just wrote itself. "File copies notarized. We'll bring the original," he said, tapping the leather binder like a drum. "Judges do not argue with title." We also prepared the line that mattered almost as much as ownership. No contest clause. Lydia had put it in because she refused to leave me with half measures. Clause 4B. Any beneficiary who contests the trust or files a legal action like a conservatorship to seize control forfeits their gift and is deemed to have predeceased. The elegance of it made me sit down. My wife had time-traveled future malice and neutered it with a sentence. Will the judge enforce it? I asked. Graham nodded. Courts dislike ugly surprises. They love clean lines. She'll enforce it if she believes the trust is real, valid, considered, and Lydia's letter makes it human. He paused. You understand what that means for Vivian? I do, I said. Lydia gave her a choice. She made the wrong one. I called Sarah. I expected awkward. I got a spine. I will be there, she said. My lawyer will too. She spoke like a person who's told men twice her size to sit down while she saved them. Your house is safe, Uncle Paul. It always was. That night I slept facing the door like a sentry and woke to my own calm. Not joy, not vengeance, the mechanical steadiness of a man standing in an earthquake on a base-isolated slab. We would walk into court and let Lydia raise her hand from the grave and take the oath for me. The hallway reckoning, disinheritance, read aloud. Hook. Courtrooms deliver verdicts. Hallways deliver consequences. The heavy doors sighed shut behind Vivian and Derek, two people fleeing gravity. Their whispers bled panic. Day, jail, the boat. Graham and I followed at a stroll. Predators don't expect prey to walk them down calmly. She spun when she heard our steps. You, she spit. Fury had boiled away the theater. You did this. You. Derek held her back with the survival instinct of a man who finally heard a clock. It's over, she said. The judge said it's over. That, I said gently, was the defense. Graham glanced down the hall. Right on cue, two women approached. One in a fitted suit carrying a leather tome. The other in blue scrubs. Sarah, the cousin Vivian never invited, the boring nurse, the one whose kindness made her invisible. Hello, cousin, Sarah said, polite as a receptionist and steelier than any I've met in an ICU at 3 a.m. What are you doing here? Vivian asked, voice pitched high as a kettle. I'm here as successor trustee of the Peterson Family Irrevocable Trust, Sarah said. The words landed like bricks. The lawyer, Mrs. Jenkins, opened the binder and read as if singing the first lines of a national anthem. Title, Declaration of Trust, date, 6 years ago. Grantor, Emily Peterson. Beneficiary, Paul Peterson. Trustee, Sarah Jenkins. She turned one tabbed page. Schedule A, the residence at 1140 Ash Lane. Transferred to the trust, 6 years past. Vivian shook her head like a horse trying to clear a fly. He owns that house, she said, pointing at me with a finger that still wore red. He does not, Mrs. Jenkins said. He is lifetime beneficiary with full right to possession and income, none to sell or gift. You can no more sell that home than you can sell a sunrise. Sarah flipped to a yellow flag. Clause 4B, she said, reading clearly. If any named beneficiary, including you, Amelia Hayes, files an action to seize control of the assets of the lifetime beneficiary, that beneficiary is deemed to have predeceased and is irrevocably disinherited along with their issue. What does that mean? Derek asked, small. It means, I said, looking at my daughter for the last time, you chose. Your mother gave you 2 futures. You picked this one. I didn't raise my voice. Rage hung its coat on the hook by the door and went to sleep. What was left was administrative, a heart-stamping paid on a debt it never should have owed. Vivian slid down the marble wall and became smaller. The navy suit cost a fortune. It looked like regret. We left them there, Graham to file, Sarah to walk me home, Mrs. Jenkins to courier certified copies like deeds to a city. The marble swallowed our footsteps the way time consumes applause. Justice, when it's clean, doesn't feel like victory. It feels like maintenance, a thing finally fixed. A year of quiet, engines that make good. Peace is not silence. It's the hum of a machine you trust. 1 year later, the porch still faces east and my coffee is still too hot. The difference isn't the weather. It's the absence of watching. A hunted man hears his own house like a threat. A safe man hears it breathe. The fallout arrived in envelopes. Barclay suspended 2 years. Prentice, license revoked. A tidy letter from the medical board full of words that used to be abstract to me. Malpractice, fraud, conduct unbecoming, now suddenly felt like warnings to younger versions of my daughter. The bank reclaimed the Medina house. The cars disappeared on flatbeds. The jet share became a story told in bars as a cautionary joke. The most expensive plane we never flew, Derek might say if he still says anything to anybody. I don't hate them. Hate is a tax paid forever. I prefer fines, assessed, paid, closed. They went bankrupt, Chapter 7. I do not know where they live. I do not ask. The silence I keep now is different than the one I wore like grief. This one is a choice. Sarah comes up twice a quarter. She sets her scrub top on the back of Lydia's chair and spreads out the statements like maps. We are, she says, the board of Lydia's last masterpiece. The portfolio hums. The house is steady. And Lydia's clause I did not know about, the one that turns money into mercy, makes me proud in a way that aches. 25% of net annual income goes to Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in her name. On the first disbursement day, Sarah wrote the check. I signed. We cried like professionals who don't have time to cry. I walk the garden Lydia loved. The roses still insist on blooming, scandalized by rain and delighted by sun. I oil the banister. I leave the stair creak. I keep the mantle camera, turned off now, like an old medal in a drawer. Not to surveil, but to remember what vigilance looks like when you make it serve you instead of the other way around. Sometimes in the evenings I read Lydia's letter again. Not because I need the law of it, but the love. She did the hardest thing, love asks. Guard the person you adore from the person you adore, should that person change. Sometimes silence is the time you spend reloading, I said once, and I stand by it. But I've learned something gentler too. Sometimes the truest love is design. Lydia designed a future in which I would be too tired to fight and still be safe. And then she gave me the tools to fight anyway. People ask if I miss Vivian. I miss a girl who used to race me down the driveway and laugh when I lost on purpose. The woman we met in court, she is gone to me. My love for Lydia outlived even that grief. I won't let what Vivian became erase the goodness Lydia built. Have you ever had to set a boundary that felt like breaking your own heart? A line you drew not to punish, but to protect? I hope you never do. If you must, I hope you have a Lydia, a mind that plans, a hand that signs ink so your future can be safe even if you falter. Today the house is ordinary again. It is the best word I know. Ordinary means the sprinklers come on at 6. The kettle whistles at 7. The mail arrives with bills I pay and catalogs I don't. Ordinary means the engine Lydia left keeps turning, and every year a check goes out with her name at the bottom, the past reaching forward to repair what took her. Ordinary means I measure my life not in dangers averted, but in small tasks done right. Tighten a hinge, pull a weed, replace a bulb, call a friend back. The last thing I do each night is run a finger along the edge of Lydia's letter in the drawer. Paper can't hold you, but design can. She built me something that outlived her. I live inside it the way a man lives inside the house he framed with his own 2 hands. Rehook. If you're listening to this because someone is trying to take what's yours, hear me. Save everything. Record the truth. Find your Lydia inside yourself or beside you. Love protects. And when love has to fight, it fights like an engineer. With plans, with paper, with proof.